Welcome back. We've been left here to fend for ourselves while Anna and Simon enjoyed themselves in Tralee ahead of the AM live show.
Let's cross back to them now. What's happening with you, Anna?
Thank you, Ray. You're very welcome back to Tralee, here for the very first AM live event. Now, I've left Simon in charge of the stage. Let's hope things are going okay, because I've nipped outside to talk to our resident sleep expert, Lucy Wolfe, who joins me for a little chat this morning. Good morning to you, Lucy.
Hi, how are you?
You're going to be joining us on the stage a little bit later here at Ballygarry House Hotel. But for now, we're going to get some tips. And we're not just talking about households with younger children. We're talking about anyone getting into a positive sleep pattern, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I just thought that maybe it's a good time of year in the run-up to Christmas now to maybe start laying, you know, a foundation in advance of Christmas to start getting some better sleep for everybody in the household unit.
OK, so how do we get started, Lucy?
Well, I always think it's a good idea to, you know, stop putting things off, because that's often the way, you know, when you have a sleep challenge, that it just feels like there's never a right time. I would say if you can ring fence 3 or 4 weeks, it's a great time maybe just to say, look, we're going to try and do that with a goal for beginning or to moving forward and getting better sleep.
OK, so devising a plan.
Yeah, then I think then often it's overwhelming for people. So if you're tired, it's so difficult to kind of envisage maybe even becoming more tired as you begin what I describe as being a sleep learning exercise. So with any self-improvement exercise, it's going to maybe get worse before it gets better. But outside of, let's say, saying it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks, why don't we break it down in chunks? And I often think it's a good idea to start writing things down.
Okay.
So, you know, start visualizing the plan that you're going to start to put in place for yourselves, and also then breaking it down to bite-sized chunks.
Okay.
So maybe taking 3 or 4 days at a time, and within that 3 or 4 days, what are we going to do and how are we going to operate within the whole family unit?
OK, now there's 6 steps to get this right. Laying the foundation and asking for help. That is so important, isn't it?
I really do, and I obviously understand that not everybody has a support network, but I think this is the only real time maybe that you should definitely try and invoke it. You know, pick a time where maybe both parents are available, or two adults are available to you. And I suppose drafting support, especially if you've got older children in the household unit. Again, that feels really difficult to maybe start to make a plan, because you feel like, what am I going to do with my older children if I've got to spend some time trying to help my younger child sleep? So again, you know, drafting a babysitter to maybe mind the older children, or vice versa, and just be kind and compassionate to yourselves as we begin, because it is hard, Anna.
It is hard, and what I was going to say to you was, in the real world, and I know myself, if I have a 2-year-old who takes his nap in the middle of the day, he'll often take it at a time where I need to go and collect the other 2 children from
school. And that is
school.
one of the biggest issues that I encounter with families with more than one child, that they do have school runs, they do have extracurricular activities that often clash with the napping schedule. And again,
if a toddler has fallen asleep, Lucy, and they're asleep maybe 15-20 minutes into maybe an hour-long nap, and you have to disturb them, you have to disturb them, don't you?
You do, and I suppose ordinarily, we can work around that. You know, when a well-rested child is super flexible and adjustable. The problem often is you're coming from a weaker background and your child isn't well-rested, and those things undermine all of your effort. So again, this is why we ring-fence that time frame, and maybe look at someone to carpool with you while you do your school runs, so that we really try to make sure that the sleep can be prioritised for the child that we are working on. And then I know it's not realistic to put everything on hold, but you try to make adjustments and changes. I always say invoke the changes in the beginning, and once you are starting to make progress, well, then loads more flexibility can come, because you will have to do your school runs, and you will have to make real life
does have to continue,
it does, but it's a bit like going on a diet. In the beginning, you have to make some really initial big changes, and then once those changes are made and you have an end result, then of course you could be more flexible within that. And then I suppose when I talk about laying a foundation, I'm looking to make sure that we are understanding the things that aren't helping your sleep practices. So again, I put a huge emphasis on the feeding and sleeping balance to the day, so that we are creating, you know, a timing structure that is in sync with the natural body clock. And then also within that, we are providing the right environment, we're making sure they're getting enough to eat and drink at the right times for their body, that they're getting enough outside exercise, because it's never just one thing.
No.
You know, it's a holistic approach where we try to make those initial changes. And again, that's why writing it down in the beginning is important.
And keeping that diary, I suppose.
Yes, because it's very hard to be objective when you're in the middle of it.
How many hours, first of all, does an adult need to get? Now, I know we're all different,
yes,
but generally.
We work within a bandwidth of maybe aiming for somewhere between 7 to 9 hours.
Okay.
Some people would need a little bit less, some people might need a little bit more, but if we commit maybe even to 7, then at least then we're maybe trying to meet the minimum of that sort of bandwidth that is recommended.
Okay, and is there a benchmark for children? Let's say toddlers, first of all.
Yeah, so if I took an overnight tendency for a young child, I might say we'd aim for somewhere between 10 and a half to 12 hours.
Okay.
Now, again, they're all different, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to completely consolidate that bandwidth. But again, we're trying to commit to those levels of sleep for our young children, because then we know we're hitting our marks for optimum outcomes.
Okay. Don't compare, and I think this is a really important one, because we can often have friends who tell us, you know, my newborn baby practically is sleeping overnight, and you start to feel very guilty about your own structure at home.
I do feel, because, you know, I support a lot of people, and within that support, reassurance is probably one of the most important things, because they are feeling undermined, demoralised and vulnerable by all the things that they're hearing and seeing from other parents. And everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own perceptions of what's working for them and what's not working for them. I recommend plough your own furrow, almost put the blinkers on, concentrate on your own little family unit, because each child is different. Each child's story is different. Each family unit is entirely different and individual. And I suppose, think about it like that. The way I describe it is I'm looking for a personal best. Your child's personal best, nobody else's.
Nobody else's, okay, that's a really good point. We have a lot of questions coming in from viewers this morning. The one pattern that seems to have developed is Sharon's question, but lots of people have repeated it. We have a 2-year-old who wakes at 5 a.m. every morning. How do we stop this from happening? And that is my own situation as well.
It's the scourge of a lot of parents, if I'm totally honest with you. There are so many things that affect this particular piece, and the clocks going back there a couple of weeks ago have almost heightened this issue for lots of families. Very briefly, when we're dealing with 5 a.m. waking, there are 3 or 4 major pieces of the puzzle. The first one is that the baby or the child is going to sleep already overtired. So that's a bit counterintuitive, because often when we want a later wake time, we push out bedtime. Whereas actually one of the most important things is to bring that bedtime forward.
Okay.
And then I often close the gap between the end of day sleep and bedtime. So rather than having a big wake period between the nap finishing and being in bed asleep, I actually only look for maybe a 4-hour wake period. But if this child is over 8 months of age, I would look for only a 4-hour wake period between the end of day sleep and being in bed asleep, which might mean napping until 3 or 3:30 to be in bed asleep comfortably for 7 or 7:30. And that's the first, let's say, adjustment. And then I try and see, what does that child associate with going asleep at bedtime specifically? And very often the child is maybe using a bottle, a drink of something, to get themselves over to sleep in either a complete capacity or a partial capacity.
Yes.
This enables a sleepy state, but it disables the 5 a.m. sleep phase. So to try and work through that, I might move out the final feed, close those gaps, and then see, can I entirely help them to go from awake to asleep at bedtime specifically.
Okay, interesting.
And then that opens up the channels for that 5 a.m. waking to start to erode. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks to correct.
Okay, so you correct it and then you have to stick with it
You
and
do,
commit
and I
to that
suppose
routine.
we generally encourage you to treat any waking before 6 a.m. as night time, which means you need a consistent response. Now, I'd always use my stay and support approach, because that then enables the child to have no mixed messages, have predictable responses, and then that will help that 5 turn into 6 and maybe even to 7 if you're really lucky.
Oh, if you're really lucky.
I know,
Lucy
right?
Wolfe,
We'll aim
thank
high.
you. There's never enough time, but thank you very much as always. I'd love a nap now. Right, loads more to come from studio this morning. Up next is the Circle winner, Paddy Smith. But that's it from us here at Ballygarry House. Thanks for joining us this morning.